What's up, guys? It's your boy Dorian here, back at it again with another video. I'm here with Karama, aka TheBlerdgurl, and Robert Butler III, aka RB3, and we're back again doing another recap. You know, we're going to be here every week just dropping these recaps. So this episode is episode 3, The Holy Ghost, or is it just Holy Ghost? I believe it's just Holy Ghost, but you know, us being black, always throwing the Holy Ghost. But that being said, it was another episode. We got another fantastic episode. So I'm just going to pass it off first to you, Karama. What did you think of this episode? Because this also just prefaces by saying this episode takes place a month after episode 2. There's a little bit of a time jump, a little bit of them to give a little breather after George's death. So what was your initial reaction and first impression, review of this first episode, Karama?
I think the episode 3 of Lovecraft Country, I think should be subtitled The Range, because Journey's range in this was absolutely phenomenal. Like she literally went from church morning to happy partying to basically having sex for the first time to house being possessed, friends being possessed, to basically turning into Klaus from Umbrella Academy by the end of this episode. So she had a full season's worth of an arc in one episode, and it was phenomenal. She needs to win something for this.
Yes.
I also hope that we get to see every episode. I also hope we get each of these actors gets to shine, because I've been saying about Angelou Ellis, Hippolyta, you don't put Angelou in a show and have her sit at home. So I'm hoping that we see, we get to see more in future episodes from her. But yeah, this was definitely Letitia's episode. Also, the other thing that I loved about this episode are some of those little moments. They've been tucking in real life history behind some of the fiction of this story, and I love it in the same way I loved it in Watchmen. So it's like the Easter eggs are finding the real stuff that happened, not the fake stuff. So there's amazing things, like everything from when the little boy that was at the Ouija board, one of the little boys was Emmett Till, to the comment about Martin Luther King being with a white woman. He was, and being his name, he was not born Martin, he was born Michael. Like all these little things, even the concept of the family that had to fight. When they say, remember that family across town that tried to move in, you heard what happened to them. That's a real couple. That was a real black family that had to get a court order to get into their own house. So yeah, there's that mix. And then I feel of all the episodes, we're only 3 in, this had the most effects. Like this had a lot of effects. The effects team did work this time.
Yeah, and RB3, I'll pass to you in just a second. I just wanted to piggyback off what you said just about how, just the effects in general, and how this episode, although it did have a lot of effects, this episode kind of tailored back to how the first episode, although they were dealing with monsters and stuff like that, the real monsters that they were dealing with is racism, bigotry, and dealing with these awful white people. So we got a lot more of that in this episode, bringing us back to that. Although this is a horror show, we're still dealing with real world things. So RB3, I'll pass it to you. What did you think about this episode? What did you think about their incorporation of not just the effects, but just how they're telling the story again and bringing us back to the realism of these white racist people?
Well, I thought it was great. And I think, going off of what Karama was saying about Journey's character, Letty, her having to deal with the ghost on top of dealing with the racist white people honking that horn in front of her house all the time. I mean, can you imagine how annoying that would be if somebody was literally in front of your 3 cars in front of your house, literally all the time, honking nonstop? That would drive me insane. So like that scene where she gets the bat and is like busting out the windows and like taking them all out, I thought that was absolutely amazing. It was like the most cathartic moment of the show, even outside of like the horror, supernatural, effects driven elements. So like you said, like the realism plays into the supernatural just as well for me. But then going on to the supernatural part, I thought the whole Holy Ghost stuff was interesting too, because I think it serves as a kind of an interesting metaphor for how, like there was this fear back in the 1950s, 1960s that like black people are going to move into these white areas and take them over, and they're going to destroy the suburbs and all this kind of stuff. So like there's a bunch of violent backlashes that came, because of it. Some of which that Karama mentioned just a little while ago. But I think, having that, but I think it's like almost like I think it fits into like today's commentary about that we can have about like gentrification too, right? Like how now the conversation is flipped. Now Black people are in houses, in places, in suburbs like Compton, like Inglewood, and being driven out for the sake of white homeowners and white businesses. So it's like, I think it kind of plays on that commentary almost to the flip side, but shows you like the ugly racist side of that approach back in like during that time period. So I think everything that this episode was doing was absolutely great. I thought seeing the characters grieve over George was heartbreaking. In the beginning few minutes, seeing his wife rip out those pages in the Dracula book, which was his favorite book, I thought was heartbreaking. I think just seeing these people kind of deal with the post non-George world and how kind of saddened it makes them. I think that's also heartbreaking too. So
yeah, and just touching on that, let's talk about that a little bit. So, like I said, this does take place a month after George. R.I.P. fam. Like, you'll be back. We're gonna see him soon. I'm putting it in the universe. You don't get Courtney B. Vance.
Well, I mean, but also this is a Lovecraft show, and the Reanimator was one of the Lovecraft stories, and Letty's already been reanimated.
He coming back.
And that power is something that now Tick has. So maybe he's gonna bring him back. I don't know. I didn't read the book. Like I said, this is just me speculating. But I don't think it's, again, you don't get Courtney B. Vance on the show and let him go after episode 2.
For real though. And so we got to see Angelou. I keep butchering her name. Ingenue Ellis. We get to see her. Get a little bit more shine, a little bit more. They're teasing her getting a bigger role. And one thing she knows is that these MFers are lying to her. She outright knows that Tick and George are not George. Montrose. She knows that George and Montrose are lying to her, and she wants to get to the bottom of the truth. So I'll pass to you first, Karama. What did you think of just now they're giving us more of her, and I just can't wait to see what her story, like now that from these episodes on, they keep teasing us, giving us more and more of her character. So what do you think? What do you think of her inclusion in this episode?
It's funny when I saw that scene of her ripping out the pages of the Dracula book, like Robert said, I tweeted out, I said, Hippolyta's not all right, y'all. Hippolyta is not all right. And the Lovecraft Country Twitter account retweeted me and said, oh no, she isn't. And I was like, okay, so something's gonna go down. Right. And that's just another thing also, like Hippolyta knows, like it's that woman's intuition. And also there's a lot of feminism in this episode as well as the next one. And one of the things is that all of the things, in spite of everything that's happening, the Black woman, even the white woman, even Christina, might be the ones that know the most about what's going on in the room. The men are not going to listen to them. So like even she knew when in the first I think it was in the first episode when George called her and said, listen babe, I want you to come with me on the next one. She put the phone to her chest because she knew he was terrified, and she was praying. She's like, something's wrong. And so it's just one of those things that that's also something that Anjali was so good at, but those subtleties, you could see it in her face, you could see it in her eyes. She knows she doesn't have the whole truth. She knows, like she said, like, I know y'all did something to the cop that did, that took him out, but I know I'm not getting the whole story. And I think also the fact that she has a scientist's mind. She's so inquisitive. That is also, we can talk about more about that. I think we're going to see more of that from her in future episodes, but she's very, very smart. And everything she and George did, they planned together. So I think that whole concept of a woman's place is not working for her, and she's biding her time. She's got a scientist's mind, like she loves astronomy, loves science. So I think this is her research. She's collecting enough evidence until she can stand in front of them and go, okay, so I know you're lying and this is why. And I haven't gotten to the bottom of why yet, but I know it's either A, B, or C. Like I could see her doing that in a future episode. I also, just her mourning and the way she's mourning in a very different way. She wasn't just angry at Tick. She says it later in the episode. She said, yeah, he put stuff away like George did. so you think she's mad at Tick, but she's just having a moment because he's reminding her of him. And so she's like, I can't let, I'm not even allowed to grieve in peace because there's somebody here that's just like him, somebody that's reminding me of him, you know? And so I'm like, you moving around, like she's made me feel uncomfortable in her uncomfortableness. But that's just a sign of how good of an actress she is.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And with that, there's this whole episode. I'm glad that they're including her more and more. But I do, because we do want to keep the recap short, and we got some other episodes we want to talk about. I do want to just go ahead and let's skip to the end, because we talked about the epic scene with Letty just walking out there and being a badass and killing all those cars, not killing, but destroying all those cars. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about that scene that Atticus confronts Chris. So first of all, Christina's back in this episode, and Atticus actually confronts her, like going to kill her. So we see Atticus is like done with everything, and he's going to just absolutely just pop one. Just he got his gun ready, but because she has the magic, she's able to stop him and not let him get off the bullet. So RB3, I'll pass to you first. What did you just think? How did you feel about Atticus even going up to Christina and trying to kill her in the first place? And what did you think of that whole interaction?
Well, I mean, I thought it was bold. I mean, I think he knows like the kind of power that he's dealing with, and the fact that he's like just kind of, handling the situation that way is kind of interesting. But he's a military dude. Like his approach is always going to be headstrong, shoot first, not think about like the repercussions. I think like the repercussions of that are probably going to at least make some sort of impact. I think going forward, I think like. I don't think making Christina upset is necessarily the best move for Tick right now, especially because like,
she's Emma Frost.
Yeah, exactly. Like you gotta, and especially after you just lost George, like, and like you said, Karama, I mean, this is a mystical world. There could be a way that Uncle George could come back. We just don't know. So yeah, I mean, all of that just gets me a little curious as to what his motivation is, where he's landing on that. But I think ultimately protecting Letty and protecting his family was ultimately Tick's big motivation. But I think on top of that, I think where's Atticus, where's Tick had that going for him, we obviously had Letty going through her journey with the ghost like down under. And by the way, when they talk about this whole storyline of like this evil doctor who performed all of these experiments on like a lot of, I think some of them might have been slaves. Some of them definitely during that time period of the 50s. But like this idea of like experimenting on Black people was something that was controversial during that time period too, with the Tuskegee experiment and stuff like that. So like, again, like Karama said, drawing from real life stuff on top of what Letty's going through. I think that ultimately, and listen, like that whole convergence of the ghost attacking the racist whites, I thought was awesome. So
yeah, and I not completely forgot about that, but I love that. Although we got to you saw those ghosts, and you at first you saw the torture that they were put through and all the deformation that they had to endure. But by the time that they were completely getting rid of him, they had formed their bodies back, formed their full spirits back. And in a way, I was like, oh no, this is sad in a way, but also I was smiling in a way to see them fully realized again, and even though they're in their ghost form, you see their faces and you see them untouched and unharmed. So that kind of made me smile again. So I'm glad that they got that out of the way. Before we wrap this up, is there any last things that you want to throw out there, Karama? Any other subtle things or any things that we missed, or any nuances or any hidden Easter eggs that you noticed that some people didn't talk about yet?
Well, I think that just in general, Letty died. So the fact that she's sitting in church in the beginning is fascinating.
Do you know whose voice that was? Sorry. Do you know? I remember hearing the voice, and when she was sitting there, do you know whose voice that was?
I don't. I did not. I actually didn't get a chance to research that. I don't know whose voice that was.
Oh, I still wonder.
I do know that she's sitting in church. Her faith has obviously been shifted. Also, just the dichotomy. The episode is called Holy Ghost. We're supposed to be afraid of ghosts, all ghosts, unless they're the Holy Ghost. So she's sitting in church at the beginning, an unbeliever, and she's and quiet, and she's standing and yelling and screaming bearing her soul through a traditional African religion at the end, the Vodun priestess that comes in to like basically mark them. And I had to actually tell a few people, like when she's marking them and marking the place with blood, that's the equivalent of on Supernatural when they put salt by the door. One's Nordic, one's African, same concept. And I just think it's just all these moments, and also the concept of saying their names. That's also a traditional African thing that is done at funerals when you're talking to your ancestors, things like that. You're calling their names. You're calling their names to give them energy. You're calling them names so they can help you. And so she actually calling their names and calling their full names repeatedly, that is what I feel made them whole again. Because they died such tortured souls at the hands of Ephraim. And then because it's sort of like you got to fight fire with fire. Use a ghost to fight a ghost. So yeah, they did take out those racist white men, but first they took out Hiram. That was the ghost who was the evil doctor, who was still torturing them in the afterlife. So I just thought just that image, and people forget, Ephraim then possessed Tick keeps, and images of Tick keep getting possessed, poor thing.
Right.
So like she's so torn with this man. And then, he possesses him, and he's going to try and kill her in Tick's form, so just the violence against Black people, violence against women, things like that. And also I knew when he and her had that moment in the party, I knew she was a virgin. I was like, she's gonna, and then it's gonna mean something later, but she's doing things that she didn't do before. I don't think she would have the energy to run around and smash white people's cars. And she knew, she smashed them, smashed the cars, took the bat, and they knew what to do. Somebody popped that trunk. She got that bat in the trunk. The evidence is gone. Her sister's out. And a man gave her her coat, so that she put the coat on, kneeled down, put their hands on their heads. Like, this is happening. And things like that, I thought that type of thing was fascinating because, again, it was led by a woman. So, yeah, again, this episode should be called The Range. The Range of Journey Smollett, and just overall another phenomenal episode.
We need to be able to defend ourselves. You have his blood. Must be the key to finding his pages.
You can't win this game. They're setting up for you to play. You gonna help us or not?
For us, it's a rat race to the finish line. And it's winner takes all.
This is episode 4, titled A History of Violence, and I gotta say, this is another, like we said, is another intense, impactful episode. And this episode actually starts off with Montrose kind of having some flashbacks, some like I don't want to say PTSD to a certain extent, where he's just like he's going through it, and you just see him struggling. So we're introduced to that, and I right off the back I was hooked. I was like, what's going on? What do we have here? So I'll pass it to you first, as always. Like, we want to go through, there are a lot of scenes that we need to recap in this. So I'm going to pass it to you first, Karama. What do you think of this opening, first of all?
Well, the first thing I thought of is, I know he shouldn't burn this book. I know this is a bad idea. From the beginning, I'm like, that's not smart, Montrose. But I do think that Montrose, yes, is suffering from PTSD. Hopefully in a future episode, we'll get a flashback to find out how they captured him, what they did to him, because no one's really addressed that. And he's clearly not dealing with it well, because he's basically stayed drunk since he's been back. Like all the last episode, he was pretty much drunk. And I think that I keep giving subtitles to these episodes. This is the Raiders of the Lost Ark episode. Because this turns into like a treasure hunt and everything. And that's what's so interesting about this show, is that like it always starts one place and takes you on this crazy journey over the span of an hour. There are a lot less this episode, because it's so much action in it. I think for me, it felt a lot different because all the previous episodes, we had these moments of close-ups.
Yeah.
And these moments of quiet. We didn't have too many of those this episode. Like, I could probably count on one hand how many close-up shots we got of people, because it was really about it was traveling, and then it was 2 and 3 people. Every got in Hippolyta's car. It was really funny watching Hippolyta's face when she was like, y'all just gonna take my car and think that I'm not coming? Why would you think that? Driving to Chicago. I I thought it was also fascinating some of the other themes that were explored with like Letty's sister, because they bought the house, but Letty's sister's got to do something to make money. So she's sort of, it's so funny because I kind of look at her and her blues singing at night, like Ma Rainey, bringing in like that so many Black women really are the root of blues and the root of rock and roll, but they're not given their due, and they're subtly doing that. Speaking of music, loved Christina's entrance, driving in her fabulous car with Rihanna's "Bitch Better Have My Money." That's another that just juxtaposition that Misha Green has been doing with the time period is here, but the music is from over here. And then of course the third act where we get into where it was all Raiders of the Lost Ark, trying to get this scroll, trying to get this document that has the information they need about basically the sons of Adam. And I also think that the only connection that I caught to the last episode was when Christina couldn't cross the threshold because there was still goat's blood in the door. Right. So like I said, so that proves that she's either A, dead, or and has been reanimated, or B, some type of witch or has some type of entity spirit in her that is not of this world or not of the human world.
Yeah, and speaking of that, you just touched on it real quick, but it feels like each of these episodes in a way are able to stand on their own, but also like they're loosely connected. And with these episodes, episode 3 and episode 4, at the end of episode 3, this pretty much picks up right after what we left off from episode 3, where Atticus, after we flash forward from Montrose having some issues, we see Christine confront Letty and say like, yo, what up? Atticus tried to kill me. What the hell was that about? And then what Karama, I think we spoke about it off camera, but just for people at home that might not really know about mysticism or when it comes to African Buddhism or things like that, you saw the red marks that she placed.
So yeah, I think I mentioned this in our recap of episode 3, but yeah, the blood that's left on the door, that's left over from the goat that the voodoo priestess basically sacrificed on the stoop when she was blessing the house and blessing them. And what that is, I was saying that's sort of the African version of the salt that you sprinkle by the windowsills and by the door to keep spirits and vampires out in like European and Nordic mythology. So blood is like the African version, and salt is the other. And specifically, I think animals' blood, but it's like something of life. And I think what's interesting is that gave us a little insight, I think, into Christina's powers. So because at first I was like, okay, so she's just a witch that she's just a witch that acquired these powers. But when she couldn't cross the threshold, I'm like, oh, unless she had died too and was brought back, maybe there's something about her, or maybe whatever spirit is in her, also is not of this, earth. So I found that fascinating.
And what I thought was interesting, after the scenes that follow that, is we see Letty confronting Atticus about going up to even try to kill Christine. And just we've talked about these past few weeks about how these characters, although we've been with them for a short time, feel very familiar, feel very fleshed out. Some of Journey or Letty's characterism and some of her mannerisms, I swear I could see my sister, I could see my mom like yelling directly at Atticus, like, why would you do that, or why wouldn't you tell me? And then like getting all the information later, like first coming in hot yelling, and then like slowly de-escalating and trying to get back to.
But tell me you didn't love that little boy in the library though.
Yeah,
that little boy was he had 2 scenes, and I was like, somebody give that child a show.
stole that whole scene. But yeah, he was hilarious. But what I thought was interesting, and I'll pass to you, Robert. What it was revealed was that his Atticus's intentions after his first plan was, I'm gonna kill Christina and I'm kill Christine, and then I'm gonna get out of here. That was his original plan, was to just outright dip. But because that he wasn't able to kill, he stuck here. So I'll pass to you, RB3. What did you think about him wanting to leave and just that whole buildup of Christine and confronting Letty?
Well, I thought it was interesting. I mean, that kind of happened in the last episode, and we wondered where that was going to lead. And yeah, I think what's crazy is that I think when you look at like Atticus, like as a character, like he's definitely strong-willed, and he definitely like has like this kind of overwhelming sense of adventure and overwhelming sense of he's just going to do it regardless, right? But I think there's a certain sensitivity that he has with Letty, and the way Letty reacts to situations that he kind of takes a little bit more personally. I think that's interesting. I think also with Christine, I think, look, I think he is kind of he's starting to figure out, along with everybody else, that at least like as of right now, she doesn't appear to be the worst person. Like at the moment, we definitely see the brother having at least crafting something a lot more nefarious going under here, at least compared to Christine. So, I mean, he definitely like is, trying to, I guess, empathize with her a little bit more. But yeah, I'm kind of curious because I don't, especially like after, everything that's gone down, like, thus far in the series, I don't really know what the point of like keep digging in this hole is going to do. I mean, I'm guessing it's, therapeutic for, resolving, their loss of George and maybe bringing George back. But, at the end of the day, like, these are forces that are a lot more powerful than these characters. So it tells you a lot about these characters that they're willing to fight these battles to begin with. So.
Yeah, and that kind of, so after I'm trying to think of all the bigger moments, and you guys definitely will help me out as we go along. But another thing I wanted to highlight, it's another small moment besides the little black kid telling them to be quiet in the library. What I love was we got to see Dee just tell her mom that, like, she was like, hey, I'm going to go to the comic shop with my friend, like we're going to go read some comics. I was like, you always love to see stuff like that. That put another smile on my face.
Raising them right.
Blur representation.
It really was, and what that led to us was what we got to see. I want to keep calling her Hippolyta.
Hippolyta.
It's Hippolyta, but we got to see Hippolyta. She's back again, and we get more of her character. And because they're taking her car, she has to go with them on their journey to go wherever they're at because they're using her car. And she's at the point now. You can tell that she looked at when she was talking to Letty. She had that face. She was like, I know y'all are lying. Like I know something's up. Y'all might as well just tell me. That smirk. You could tell she's ready.
But also the other thing is that that we saw sort of before they left, that piece that she took from Letty's house. That is what Christine is looking for. That is the time traveling device that Christina said when she's in the cop's office. Like, that's how he traveled, isn't it? That's the thing that she wants. And Hippolyta is trying to figure it out. But see, the thing is, Hippolyta is an astronomer. So this isn't going to be foreign to her. As soon as, just like that guy said to her, I believe you can figure this out just like you figure everything else out. All you got to do is find the key. And I think that's what part of her journey is, like the fact that she's going to take this trip with them. They all end up in Boston. They all end up at the Boston Museum. And it's funny because everybody has something that they have to do at the museum. But Hippolyta, even though she seems like a background character right now, her journey is to that planetarium because I think she's like, I'm going to look at this on a bigger scale and figure out what these planets are looking at, or what am I seeing in this statue. So I think it's a very interesting, everything crosses at the Boston Museum, which I think is fascinating. And then they also go on their Indiana Jones quest there.
Yes. Let's go ahead and we can just talk. Let's talk about that. The whole. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't really expect it to go down that little, like they're going on their own little sub adventure where they're like you said, Raiders of the Lost Ark. I didn't expect that, but I was pleasantly surprised. And once they started going through that, it felt like not a whole another episode or anything, but it felt like it gave us a much needed lighter tone than what we were dealing with these past episodes. Like, although the past episodes were amazing and there were light and fun moments scattered throughout them, the overall tone of it was just very heavy, very we're still dealing with Uncle George's death. So the back half of this episode, although they're still dealing with George's death, it felt more fast-paced, more adventurous for them, and felt just like a lighter tone for them. Although they were still dealing with deadly things, I felt like it was like a sigh of relief for them, a sigh of relief for the audience as well. Like, give us a little break from all that emotional heart trauma that you've been putting us through. So what did you think about that, the whole Raiders of the Lost Ark sequence and just them exploring down below the cave, RB3?
I thought that part was great. I mean, I thought I think this episode is definitely more action-packed than I think the previous ones. And and where even on the horror sense, right? Like I think the first three are a little more horror centric, and I think this one's a little more action centric, with the horror coming in at the end. But it's funny because the more and more we're getting into the series, like now we're at episode 4, and now I kind of fully have kind of embraced this idea that the show is not necessarily a perfect anthology, but almost every single episode is going to be its own mini chapter to begin with, and it is going to add up to a larger story. But I mean, this episode really was like a far departure from like the other ones,
Right.
and I think that's I'm down for it. I mean, I like that it's every chapter is its own little chapter, own little adventure or whatever. But in terms of the Indiana Jones stuff itself, I thought it was cool. I thought that the bridge falling, for one, I thought the whole swinging axe across the bridge was crazy because you couldn't even see it. Like, how did they see it? That would have scared the heebie-jeebies out of me. Number two, like the whole bridge collapsing, like as Montreal had to get across. And by the way, Montreal, I thought he was going to be a little bit more of like a courageous kind of, dude, but I mean, he was kind of shaken and scared for a lot of this episode. So it was funny seeing that aspect as well. And I do have to comment, when they get past that part and they get into like the water tunnel thingy, and there's like the production design where there's the lights on both sides and the water and the flashlights, the cinematography and all of that there was absolutely really, really brilliant. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just shooting in the dark, but I feel like this might be one of the bigger budget episodes, maybe. But yeah, I definitely thought it looked great. I thought the aesthetics were great. And I think it was a fun addition to the story. A very real story about, where Indiana Jones, we make an Indiana Jones comparison, how he's hunting down artifacts, from like Nazis and all that kind of stuff. This episode is about a history of violence, and they're literally looking for artifacts and documents that are going to lead to more questions about the Sons of Adams, right? Or the Sons of Adam, which is which we've already learned so far in the series, has its own history of violence and is a metaphor in a greater extent to the violence perpetrated by white slave owners towards slaves during slavery. So the fact that they kind of repackaged the Indiana Jones concept into this kind of storyline, I think is really fascinating.
Oh, I feel like I love that. I love that, RB3.
Oh, man.
And one thing while we're talking about the whole sequence, I thought it was another quick funny moment is that Letty had to let Atticus know. She was like, the whole universe does not revolve around you, MFer. Like, I died.
No,
like, I literally died.
But you know what's really funny about that scene? Because she said, she was talking about how he was acting. He's like, he was kidnapped. I died. Everything, it's not all about you, but then she says the whole universe doesn't revolve around you. But what was interesting about that line is, I think in the future episode, we're going to see that it does. Whatever magic that he's carrying now, I think it is the center of the universe.
I hope.
And I just thought it was interesting wording.
I think that's true. I would hope that, but that would be amazing.
But what Robert was saying though about the lighting and direction and stuff, I just want to point out that Victoria Mahoney, who is directed this episode, and that was her. And she was the first Black woman to ever. She did a second unit on the last Star Wars movie and first Black woman to ever direct in Star Wars. So
that was her that did episode 4.
Yeah,
hell yeah,
Vic Mahoney directed it. Yeah,
a big supporter of Geeks Color. Wow, I'm so proud.
Yeah, that now you gotta let that's why it's like yes, it's that little the little sprinkle.
Hey,
this was Vic Mahoney's and the only reason why I know that was somebody tweeted out like, yo, they're loving this one. And then Vic is like, I love the fact that so many people love this show. And somebody said, wait till they see episode 4, wait till they see yours. And so I was so excited to like, look at the credits. I'm like, yep, this is ours. So Vic Mahoney did this one. So I think that has a lot to do with like the lighting and things like that. Other, like, me, I love looking for the little things. Yeah. A couple of little things are in the library. When you pull out to the wide shot of Tick sitting at the table, there's a picture of W.E.B. Du Bois sitting above him.
Yes.
And W.E.B. Du Bois, a lot of people know him for his writing about nonfiction, but people don't realize he's one of the earliest Black science fiction writers. Like, he's one of the fathers of Afrofuturism. He wrote a short story called The Comet, And because of all the things that connect in the show, I cannot help but think that this has some, like, we're going to see something Comet like. It's about a black man and a white woman who both are the only, what Comet hits the planet and they're the only people who sort of survive. And it's a very interesting, like, story, again, out of worldly, very, there are no accidents in this show, so I can't help but think that that's an issue. And then the body that floats by them when they're in the tunnels. And she goes, you know, I think that's my neighbor. And then it made me think, okay, remember when you saw the elevator in the previous episode go all the way down to the bottom, and you saw those magical symbols that started showing up as you went lower and lower, and then you saw the bodies of the 3 people that tried to attack them. I'm wondering if all of these tunnels connect.
That's what I was thinking when we saw that.
I mean, they're miles away from, you know, where they live, but you know, so I just couldn't help thinking that it was the same thing. But yeah, then we get this inner sanctum thing. Oh my God.
Oh, but okay. So before we talk about that, I do want to take a little step back and talk about we got more of Ruby's character, and with Ruby's character, the brother. Does he have
Michael?
A name? Michael.
I'm pretty sure it's Michael. I'm pretty sure it's Michael. I'm gonna just triple check, but because it would make sense the way that they were talking about, like, Adam and Eve, like his father was obsessed with that stuff. I'm almost positive that it's Michael, but I'm gonna look it up. You guys can ask Rob stuff while I look it up.
All right. So we got the brother, the Michael.
Yes.
The brother.
The brother. Let's say it's the brother.
We got a brother from another mother who's the brother. No. RB3, cut this part out. All right, so we got we've got Ruby singing. We cut to Ruby singing another amazing song, but the crowd won't give her.
Dead.
The crowd, what the hell, weak ass crowd. Yeah. But after she does that, she gets some drinks, and then we see the brother, Christine's brother, introduce himself and like promise her that he can give her the world. And Karama, you actually had a very interesting theory that I was like, oh wait, I could see that. I would love to see that. So can you talk about your theory and what you think will happen with that relationship?
Well, here's my thing, just overall, like the last episode of this episode, it's actually really interesting commentary on feminism, in that we see in the planetarian, Hippolyta talks about the fact that she actually named a constellation, but they didn't want a black woman's name on it. I'm sure that's based in fact. There's a lot of fiction that parallels with fact in this. We also see, even with all of Christina's powers, when she goes to she's picked up by the cops who run the other lodge of the Sons of Adam in this town, and they're pissed off to see her there because they're like, I'm not going to use the word they use, but we don't let women in our lodges. So I don't know why you're here. You need to go. So with all her powers, she still can't control anything. That was one of the reasons why she gave the ring in episode 1 to Tick. Because, you know, she wanted to get revenge because women aren't allowed. He's like, you know, we have a similar thing. So I honestly think here's the thing. It'll be lovely to think that he really wanted to get him some, but he looked awfully bored when he was giving her drinks. He was giving Ruby drink after drink after drink, waiting until she got wasted, sweet talking her. And then she lets her guard down. They go back to her place. I don't know where that is. It might have been his place. But anyway, they didn't even make it all the way up the stairs, you know, and they get busy. I personally think he wants an heir. I think he's they're trying to continue their bloodline, and he's trying to create another boy, so that, you know, because it's only really men that can run this. But I could be wrong. Maybe he really does love him some, you know, Chocolate Thunder. Maybe that's how he gets down.
Maybe he got a little jungle fever, you know, you never know. I mean?
Honey, I'm never coming home.
And then, and when they actually start to introduce themselves, and this is something that we've also been talking about each week about Letty's, where she comes from in her background, is that they finally confirm and acknowledge that this is Letty's, they're half brother, half sister, they're half related, and from there, like you can see they're starting to,
not the guy that she's sleeping with, but Letty and Ruby.
Letty and Ruby, Letty and Ruby are half sisters. So what Karama, you've been also talking about just how we're getting more of, we need to get Letty's story. So this
and I've been saying this from jump, because a lot of people on Twitter were saying like, oh, why is it got to be the light skinned sister that gets the lead? Why can't the dark skinned sister have the lead? And I for one was saying, wait, I have a feeling, after watching the first episode, I said, I have a feeling this casting is intentional and has to do with the story. Because when they went to visit her brother's just as dark as her sister. And they said she didn't go to her mother's funeral. She didn't get along with her mother. Her mother supposedly went crazy after she had Letty. I still maintain that I think that Letty is a product of rape at the hands of a white man, and that the mother just couldn't handle it. That's why they didn't get along. That's why she started losing it. That's the other bone of contention in the previous episode, because they think that basically the mother all of a sudden came into some money and left it to her. That's not what happened. Right. Yeah. And so, but there's those feelings of animosity. So I definitely think, and then it was basically confirmed when she sat at the bar and she said, Letty's my half sister. And he pretended he didn't know who she was. And he said, who's that? That's how I know that this wasn't genuine. Everything the two of these people do is calculated. Now, I still think we saw Christina's power. I think the brother, his power is that he's some sort of a vampire. And the reason why I said that is his reaction when she cuts her hands.
Yeah, and then he bites.
He bites it and sucks more blood out of it. Right.
Her.
Yeah. No. And she's so delirious and drunk. She don't even know that that's happening. I also think the concept of, we've talked a lot about Black folks' bodies, again, taking advantage of another body. You know what I mean? I also think the reason why I think that he might be a vampire is A, how he reacted to the blood, and B, the two of them were raising Shoggoths. You know, Shoggoths are that Lovecraft beast. That's a vampire.
With the eyes.
You know, yeah, with the eyes. That's the Lovecraft version of vampire. So I think that, and remember, the father was making people cannibalize parts of his body. Why wouldn't we think he would do the same thing with his children?
And honestly, those two look like, if we're being honest, you can pluck Christine and her brother, you can put them in the Twilight movies and they would fit in right with those vampires. So definitely look like they got some vampire qualities.
Or they were experimented on. I think he got the vampire blood and she got whatever that substance was that he was trying to get out of Tick.
I hope we get more of their background story. But with Ruby, also, this is another like a small moment, nothing really story derivative, but we do see Ruby going into a store and she's so surprised and shocked that she sees another colored woman actually working there, and we get to see a little bit more of her talking about that. And there's something that she says, I was like, that's still real to this day. She's like, there's 103 or 102 white people in there and there's one Black person, but they still wouldn't let two Black people be in there. And that's, and from the entertainment industry down into a whole bunch of other things, that's still prevalent to this day. Like, I was like, that's true.
There was another thing too. If you took a look, she was thin.
Yes.
There's a body, and she's physically can fit. She's just a chocolate version. Her features, everything. They cast that again, casting. Ruby also knows, like, I can't come back in here. And honestly, I've seen that in my own family. Like, my mother is lighter than me and was allowed to work in my mother's older, was allowed to work in the front of Saks Fifth Avenue when they did not let Black people work customer service. Black people darker than her. And she also had an accent because she was from this country. So that was okay too. My aunt, dark skin like Ruby, had to work in stock. So this is not that long ago. People think like, oh my God, this was like the 20s, the 30s. No, this was like 1962. Now the show takes place in the 50s, but this is not that long ago.
For sure. And so besides Ruby, the rest of the ending part of the episode, some stuff goes down, some things go down. Some things happen, but the main thing I did want to just touch on real quick was, so I have it here in my notes actually. So when they're doing the Raiders of the Lost Ark thing, and Karama, I'll pass to you again and let RB3 speak as well about first of all, we are
the room of dead people. The room full of dead people.
There's a room of dead people, and then this is the horror elements that RB3 was talking about earlier. So I wrote here in my notes, and I'm going to have it bleeped out, or I'm going to just say the letters. But when we first get introduced to the skeleton and bones, and she starts transforming, I was like, I literally said, F this S, hell no, to the no, to the F no. I was literally typing this down because, we all like to watch and take notes as we go.
I don't know how you were able to write during that scene. I spent the majority of that scene like this.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I noticed when they went in that room, like, besides the fact that everybody was dead, was how did they die? Like, who dies standing up holding a baby? Like, like that's a very quick death. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody should have, like, no one was falling over. Everybody was sitting at the table or standing up. Nobody was like, you know, everybody was just kind of standing. So it must have happened like in an instant. So like, that was the first thing that freaked me out. And then when they're like, all right, let's just take this piece of paper, I was like, this is not going to end like you think it is. Don't grab that paper, girl. And then when you're right, when it started to transform, I yelled. I almost threw my laptop. I yelled. And then when the body transforms, you're like, oh, okay, it's a woman. It's a Indian woman, Latin woman, First Nations woman. Okay, wait, hermaphrodite. Hang on a second. Now we're seeing something else. And then the thing that my mind went to immediately was all the experimentation that we had seen in like the previous episode and stuff. Like, oh God, they've been doing this for centuries in this room, you know, underneath the museum. And then this being, this person, because I still wasn't clear whether or not they were human or not at first, begins to speak, and they're speaking in a First Nations tongue. I don't know what language it is, and I'm going to do some research after we do this to find out what language it was. But Tick, for some reason, can understand, which means the same magic that flows through him probably flows through them. And what they were saying was, he asked first person says, "What are you?" and he says, "Who are you?" And they answer with their name, and they also said, "I am a two-spirit." And I found that fascinating because Hollywood, as well as I think mainstream in this country, many times bastardized the concept of being two-spirit and saying, oh, bisexual. That's not necessarily what it is. It doesn't always mean you're a hermaphrodite either. But it definitely means something very particular to First Nations, because they have been actually accepting the concept. And I'm not going to say all tribes or all nations, because that's not the case. Certain nations have been accepting of the concept and the spiritual place in the human race of people who are two-spirit. Mainstream, because we don't have the words for it, we put everybody from bisexual to queer to, and we would say, oh, if they're Indian, they must be two-spirit, and that's actually not the case. Now, I am obviously not an expert on the subject. This is just something that I took it upon myself to like read up on. But I do find it fascinating that this person in history is being acknowledged. And we might find out after this that this is a very famous person, First Nations spirit that was made part of the story. I don't have that information, but I just was fascinated by the fact that they were included in the story. I also was fascinated by the fact that they could leave. I mean, we'll get there, but I didn't think they'd be able to get out the room.
RB3, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was interesting. I thought like the sound design, the sound mix that they had when the body transforming was happening with the little creak and the bones cracking and all that stuff. Again, goes to the direction of the episode and all of that stuff, and the kind of slow panning camera movement that was. So yeah, it was. So I thought that was really dope, and I also, and like you said, all those themes of the two-spirit and the hermaphrodite and whatnot, and every not necessarily hermaphrodite, but this concept that they're breaching is something that is new and unique, and I think that serves the overall arc of where this episode goes. Now, what I will say is, I thought after the glass breaks on the windows and all the water starts flooding in, and they have to rush and get that, and get out of there and leave the room, while at the same time, Journey's the artifact that they have, actually, like, she drops it, and then she actually goes and dives and finds it post that, which, again, another example of her being like the most courageous out of the entire group. And I
think something happens when you die.
Yeah,
She's
exactly.
like, what's the worst that's gonna happen? I'm gonna die. Like,
right.
But honestly, when she dove again, that's the second time. The first time when they crossed that bridge, and now this time, those are the two times I thought we were gonna see Dagon, which is another Lovecraft spirit that lives in water, that lives in the deep. I was like, oh God, if I see tentacles, I'm running out of the room.
Right. Yeah, but I'm glad we didn't, and I'm glad they did. I also love the kiss that Atticus and and
Letty.
Letty had at the end of that, and then immediately after the two spirits screaming and then Atticus having to punch her in the face or punch them in the face, I thought was crazy. So yeah, all of that, all of this whole episode was really, really, really fascinating stuff. I thought it was just a great another great addition to the story so far. So.
Well, I think that's
The second half of the episode should have been called "Damn It, Montrose." That's what the second half of the episode.
Damn
should
it,
be.
Montrose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it's not too late. We need to reach out to HBO and be like, hey, here's a retitle for you real quick. You know, subtitles when you're doing your Emmy run, here are the
Right.
subtitles that you need to add to those episodes. But with that being said, I think that's a perfect way I think we can leave it from right there. We got 4 episodes down. Who knows how many episodes are left? 10, right? 13.
I think it's
believe
10.
it's 10. I believe it's 10. I think it's a 10 episode season. Yeah, so we got 10 episodes, or no, we don't have 10 episodes left. I wish we had 10 episodes left. We have 6 episodes left, so you can expect more recaps here. And just a FYI, we're watching these. We've seen first 5 episodes, and we're being good about spoilers. But once the back half hits, we're going to be watching with you guys.
Spoiling everything.
We're going to be spoiling everything. So I hope you guys are ready, and we are so excited to keep doing this coverage for you guys. So before we all leave, can I get y'all social? Can you give me y'all's plugs so the people can find y'all out here on the social medias? Karama, I'll pass it to you first.
As usual, you can find me, TheBlerdgurl, TheBlerdgurl, all over the interwebs. I'm mostly on Twitter and Instagram, but also check out my YouTube channel and my podcast as well.
Do it, please. Like if you're looking for content creation, building your brand, stuff like that, she's your girl. I mean, I don't know why I pointed like that. Like
they can see me, right?
RB3, make sure she's in this camera view when I point.
I got you. I'll switch it around.
And then RB3, where can they find you at, my man?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3, and you can find us on YouTube at First Cut. Yeah.
Well, hell yeah. Make sure to go follow them on Twitter, follow them on Instagram, and follow them on YouTube. If you're looking for new content creators during this quarantine binge, these are 2 that are must watches. Like, I don't always give out recommendations, but when I do, it's fire. So definitely go check them out. But I want to say thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe. That's all you need to do, actually. So just do those 2 things and we're all good. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace up, A-Town down.